Hey everybody, it's Olivia with Freedom at the Mat, and welcome to another Well Chat edition. So today we have in the house a woman that I know so many of you all already know, Yasmine Jameelah. She is the founder of Transparent Black Girl, and they are doing incredible work in the wellness space. She is really changing what wellness looks like and allowing for Black women all over the world to really show up authentically and to find wellness in their own way. So today we're going to talk with Yasmine about how being real creates your best, most beautiful life. You know, we're always talking about living your best life. Like for her, she's saying just be yourself, be authentic. There's no other way to be. She has an absolutely fascinating, rabid international following, and she's leading us to define wellness for ourselves and find our realness too. As you all know, Freedom at the Mat is all about women finding our personal freedom. So this conversation about authenticity is one that I'm thrilled to have. You're so high. Yasmine, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing good. How are you?
Blessed. I'm wonderfully well. I'm going to go right into it. I'm loving everything that I'm seeing you're doing. It's such a unique movement that you are leading. So, can I get right into it?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So, through Transparent Black Girl, you champion radical authenticity. Can you share how embracing true transparency, especially as Black women, becomes an act of profound self care and liberation in a world that often pressures us to conform?
Absolutely. So first, let me say I think transparency looks different for everyone. I think oftentimes if when we hear the word, we might think like just be an open book all the time, right? But ultimately, I think transparency is just you showing up as your unapologetic self and knowing too where your transparency is celebrated, where you feel safe in it, and knowing that you don't have to open yourself up to everyone, but knowing that in those environments where you feel safe, where you feel like you can soften, that transparency can thrive. And so that's been something that for me, I try to encourage our community to know that this is a space where you can embrace every part of who you are, because that for me, I truly believe is like the core of your wellness journey, which is focusing on your personal needs, what makes you feel well, and just in general, and of course in tandem with like just as Black women, as women of color, the barriers of entry that we, are fighting to be included in wellness, like those things. But in tandem with that, like what makes you feel well, right? What can help you and embrace your own individual wellness journey.
So I have so many questions, but one was just sparked, which is a unique question that was not on the ones we prepared. What if smoking weed or doing cocaine, which are actually two very different things,
Yes.
right? So let me not try to
Yes.
conflate
Yes.
those two. Let's say that something harmful, because I don't want to even be a Debbie Downer on something people may enjoy doing, but let's say something that is fundamentally bad for you, like, putting something toxic in your system.
Yeah.
Let's say that is how somebody defines wellness and pleasure. What would you say to that?
Yeah. You know
Because
what?
open-minded.
That is a good question, because I think ultimately, like, you can hear you, well, what makes you feel well? And you're like, okay, well, this thing makes me feel well, right?
Right.
So cool. But here's my thoughts on that, right? That is a really good question. Let me just say, you're coming in hot. I love that, right? So look at it this way, right? So this is girl talk, right? This is transparent talk, as I like to call it, on the mat. So when we're thinking about something that's bad for you, right? Whether it's a drug, whether it's an ex-boyfriend, which can also be a drug, right? Whether it's
Yes.
an environment that you've outgrown, those things might feel great in the moment, but what do you feel after? And so what I would ask you is, in your wellness journey, right? I might, be on on a high, working out, being focused, like enjoying, like eating clean, and then I'm like, you know what? I want to go to McDonald's, right? And not that those things are not good in, like, in moderation, right? For you to
Yeah.
have a balanced life. But
Right.
if I'm in a real good, clean, I'm focused mode, is that going to make me feel well in the moment? Possibly. But am I going to have a headache afterwards because I've been giving my body what it needs? I've been drinking a lot of water. I've been focused on hydrating. I've been focused on, stabilizing my blood sugar levels. So I think asking yourself, like, what is the after of that feeling that makes you feel well, right? And so if the after is cl- clarity, if it's joy, if it's peace, or if it's an after feeling of like, this is not something that actually made me feel well, right? Is there regret? Is there remorse? Is there, I think so, asking yourself that, moving into that, because there are many things in the moment that can make you feel great, right? But does it make
Mm.
you feel good, or does it make you feel well? I think the after effect of it is what ultimately you have to ask yourself on, do I feel well, or did I just feel good in this moment?
See, now you're going somewhere else with this. You're triggering something. So you just defined well. What I heard was triggered for me was well and good could be two different things.
Absolutely.
Wow. How do you define the difference? What's the difference between well and good?
Yes. So honestly, I think ultimately knowing yourself, right? And so I think that one of the greatest forms of wellness and self love that you can give yourself is discipline, and not this like militant, you know, do or die, now or never, like, have to be so hard on yourself, but like if I am having a conversation with the version of myself that I, see when I close my eyes, that I know I want to work towards, would this serve her?
Mm,
While it might feel good in the moment, would this serve her? Would this get her towards, what she needs? And if the answer is no, then for me, it might make you feel good in the moment, but it's not going to make you feel well.
got it.
And I
Okay.
think that for everyone is different. That thing that makes you feel good, but not necessarily makes you feel well, is different for everyone.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I'm going to spend some more time in my lived experience thinking about good versus well, but never even stop to think about what's good for me may not leave me well, right? Or vice versa.
Yeah. Or even what feels good, because what's good for you can leave you well, but versus like what feels good to you in the moment might not be what can leave you there. Yeah.
Okay. So, can you tell us where did this all get started? You are still early in your journey. If I get this right from Instagram, you're still in your 30s.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Because I was like,
I
wait,
just turned 32. Yes.
you are so young, so courageous, so bold. So tell us a little bit more about where you grew up and what did you see in your life which led you to create this movement for Black women to be transparent and authentic and find their wellness in their ways.
Yes. So first of all, thank you. It's funny. When I think about myself now, I think like, girl, to start this at like 24, like you were a real bold girl. Like, like just even thinking about that, I think, when you are younger, you're not really thinking about like, is this going to fail? Like, it was just like, I'm going to start this thing. And I'm like, I don't know if I would have had the same level of bravery now, if I'm being transparent, that I had then, but I'm grateful for it. So I grew up in Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl. And essentially I started Transparent Black Girl in undergrad. And in undergrad I had I a lot of depression, social anxiety, and uh, honestly, just the exact opposite journey at the start of college than I thought I was going to have. I thought college was going to be like Drumline and Stomp the Yard and, all those movies that I watched, right? That it was going to be this like beautiful experience. But I ended up experiencing a lot of trauma simultaneously. And at the end of college, I started going to therapy, and it changed everything for me. And simultaneously with that, there was a lot of bloggers. Like blogging was a thing that people were doing, like, back then. Everyone like had a Squarespace or WordPress, blog. That was like a thing. And so I was blogging about my life, going to therapy, and just like working on myself. And essentially I feel like I kind of had like a midlife crisis at like 23. And I was like, I don't like my hair, I don't like my relationship, I don't like my major, I don't like, how I'm feeling about a lot of things. I think
That's
ultimately,
a quarter life. Not to
yeah,
interrupt, that's a quarter life
yeah,
crisis. That's a real
which,
thing.
yes, which I did not realize was a thing, right? But like later on, of course, I found out that your brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25. So a lot of those things now like line up, right? Of that discovery. And so ultimately I started blogging, and people kept saying, I love how you're so transparent. And like there were all of these like different pages online of like Black girls this, Black girls that. And I was like, I'm gonna make a page called Transparent Black Girl. And it was just like a thought that I had, of essentially making a space to honor the other women in my life, that were inspiring me to be more transparent. And on my blog, I was talking about things that I now realize are wellness, but I didn't realize it. I was, blogging about healing from a breakup. I was blogging about childhood trauma. I was discussing naturally healing my PCOS and GERD, and celibacy, and just, like, did I want to be celibate? Like, just what were my questions? And all of that in hindsight was definitely a wellness journey. But at 23, I didn't have the language for that, right? I just thought I was just like, figuring out my life, trying to be comfortable in this new space. And then a publication was writing about like wellness bloggers that they liked. And I was like, I'm a wellness blogger? Like, really? And because I did not know that that was something that I was, doing. And as Transparent Black Girls following started to grow, people were asking me like, what did I want to do with it? And did I want to have empowerment brunches? Because that was a thing that was like really trendy back then. And I was like, I kind of want to have a book on healing from trauma, like, because that's what I'm doing right now. While it might not have necessarily been the most popular thing at the time, it was what I was interested in, and I felt like if I was going to have a group of women following me, and we were going to be talking about things, I wanted it to be something that was beyond the surface level of like networking, right? Which it can be powerful. Ultimately, if I have social anxiety, I'm probably not going to do the best in a networking room, right? So maybe we should talk about some of the deeper things. And 7 years later, here we are still doing beautiful work.
And we're so grateful. We're so grateful. I mean, for your boldness and your courageousness. I think what I want to understand is, what is it around transparency that you feel sets your soul free? Because I think that it's a concept that people need to really understand how it works, because it's almost like counterintuitive, right? You think, okay, if everybody finds out that I had an abortion, if everybody finds out that I was married and in a back room in India, or if everybody finds out that I have, an STI or whatever, if everybody finds that out, then they're not going to like me. And you're saying, no, 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 no. In order for you to be free and for you to love yourself, you need to be transparent. So I'm curious, and I know there's also another piece around boundaries and around decisions around, you don't have to tell all your business to everybody. But what is it around transparency that you identified as the key for freedom and living your best life?
Yes, absolutely. So I think for me, I realized that it was just naturally who I was as a person. I'm either a super sharer or I'm quiet as a mouse. Like there's no in between for me. And so I struggled with that. Like, I've always been an open book. And so when I was blogging, I was talking about everything. I was talking about, my daddy being in jail. I was talking about healing from an abusive relationship, trying to, make friends, like, in college while being depressed. Like I was talking about it all. I was talking about it all. I'm not going to say that everyone in my life was like, this is wonderful. Some people were like, I think you're sharing too much.
Correct.
And
Correct.
here's the thing I think about that, right? Like ultimately for me, I think now we live in a very different, like, like time where like virality is something people are chasing, right? And this idea of like, if I spill all my tea, people will want to, build community with me. They'll want to know what they'll want to be a part of my life. And I think that can be, something that you have to ask yourself, like, is the trade-off to that worth it? Right. Like, obviously for me, it worked out, but I wasn't chasing virality, right? Like I was literally like searching for a community that I did not have. And so because I, built community and seeking to do so in a way to, form something where we could come together, a business plan or, or any of those things was the furthest thing from my mind, versus now people will be like story time on how I, did XYZ.
Right.
And
Right.
so ultimately, I think with that, asking yourself, are you prepared for to still share, right? Or if you decide to pivot, because there are also people that, are now where they lead with, sharing and letting people in on their journeys. And at some point they decide they don't want to share as much anymore. And I think that's okay too, right? I don't think you have to be married to the way that people are introduced to you as online, that it's okay for you to grow and change and decide, you know what? I don't want to share as much anymore. I used to share about my therapy sessions and on a blog on a weekly basis. I haven't done that in about 5 years, right? And so I think ultimately, as you grow and change, the ways that you like to share grow and change, and that's okay too. But I do think that in the spaces where you feel safe, transparency can truly be a superpower. I don't regret a thing I've ever shared. There are times where I'm like, girl, you were really telling a lot there. However, I think it was, it worked out, right? It worked out, and ultimately, it allowed for me to release a lot of those things. Like there are things that I wrote that I don't even remember, right? Because I'm like, this was an opportunity for me to, release these things, heal in real time, and have something that I could document those changes for. And so that for me, I really think is a beautiful thing, and I'm proud of myself for it.
I have so many things to say right now, and I'm trying to organize them in my brain. And I don't want to spend forever with you, although I could. I will say this: I recently had the experience that you experienced at 24. So I was a little late. Okay.
You're right on time.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you. And I didn't even know it. That's the thing about it. My father is aging, and I had become very, very, very involved in his caretaking in Memphis, and I live in New Orleans. And in that process, it was just taking a lot away from me, like physically, emotionally, mentally, financially, which is a lot. And when I was there on my last trip, which was in June, late May, top of June, I was struggling with why I wasn't able to show up. There was some reluctance for me to truly give in this agape way in which I wanted to. And so I began to write down some experiences that had happened in our family, tracing back to my mother's death 22 years ago, 23 years ago. And I wrote it out. And fast forward, I delivered it in an open word type of event here in New Orleans. And there was this watershed that happened. But then one of the women there said, "Will you please publish this? I know I have a friend who lost her mother who I think this could help." And I was just like, this is such a personal story. And I was careful not to name people who know who my sister and my nephew are, but I didn't put their names in there. I was just trying to be careful around, as you
Yeah,
were saying, like you're telling people's business and you're telling
yeah,
your story, but your story is connected to other people.
yeah, yeah.
And I went ahead and published it. And I think it is probably one of our most read stories on Medium that I've
Hmm.
ever had around a personal experience, and on Facebook. And there are people who are texting me and just saying, "I see you, you're loved, da 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 da." And I was just like, and so I can actually say, I don't think prior to that, Yasmine Jameelah, would I have been able to say that I actually can understand how others connect with you when you are transparent. But I now, for the very first time in my life, know what that feels like. And it was definitely not intentional. I was nervous around sharing pieces of myself. I was also really nervous about shaming anybody else, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
So, what I want to ask you is for people, women, who they want to get this sense of freedom and autonomy that we're talking about, that you're leading a movement around, but they're in the very beginning of the journey and they might feel some fear or hesitation about revealing things about themselves that will get to their authentic selves. What's one piece of advice or practice you can offer to them that's going to help them gently step into that vulnerable space?
Absolutely. So first, thank you so much for sharing that. I had a similar experience during that time. My grandmother passed of pancreatic cancer, and I was her primary caretaker, and so that was something that I shared, and it was a rough journey. The responsibility, especially being so young, and having older siblings who did not step up, and so that was placed on me, and it was it was a process, and I wrote about that when I was signing papers, for her body to be released. They were like, "Wait a minute, how old are you?"
How old were you?
I was 20, 24, 25. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so lots of trauma, lots of trauma. It's like, back to back. My mother had had cancer. She survived it, thank God. And then my grandmother had cancer right after that. So it was a rough journey. And so I think now, even the more I try to live in that softness because of those years. But I would say, from a sharing perspective, if you want to share and you want to document and you're struggling with what will people say, start anonymously. I think that can be powerful as well. Someone that is in my circle, in my life, went through a situation where they wanted to share but did not want to reveal their name. And they had an article that was published that people, said, God bless you, in the comments, and they were so happy. And it was anonymous. And so for them to be able to see that, to see people resonate with their words, but not necessarily know who they were, it was a weight lifted off of them. It was a freedom. And so there are ways to share. You don't have to always let people know who you are. I think anonymous stories can be just as powerful as well, you know.
Right.
And so that is something I think you can start with if there is fear, because I do understand that, as well as you saying, wanting to keep other people safe,
Right.
as well, and you're sharing and having conversations about things, which I always do, when I'm sharing, pieces of my life, having conversations beforehand, checking in with people, and letting them know that you plan to share, and the ones that you are not in communication with anymore, just regarding them, even in that, even thinking about, how can I tell this story in a way that is not, um, demeaning to them, but also
Yes.
true to me simultaneously.
Because you know what? I gotta say, when I was writing that piece, I had other elements that I deleted. There was quite a few paragraphs I deleted. And I remember asking myself, what's the point of this piece? Is the point of the piece to tell your story or to shame someone else? So I think once you get clear around, okay, the point of this story is to is for me to find my freedom, right? And to find my liberation and to heal. So I don't need to tear uncle, auntie, mama, daddy, cousins, grandma. I don't need to tear them down. I just need to tell my story from my perspective.
Absolutely.
I think all of us know that your story is your story. So your story, there's another version of that story too that somebody else experienced, right? But for me, and my goal is my North Star is my freedom, then I'm gonna tell my version of the story. So, there are feelings that we have with our emotional wellness. And I'm getting more connected to emotional wellness. I really just learned recently from a young lady, Jazz Thomas, here in New Orleans around what emotional wellness was. But I think we talk about mental wellness, we talk about physical wellness, we talk about sustainability and wellness around that. But when we talk about emotional wellness, I believe that being transparent can aid us in being more well emotionally. Can you describe for us how it feels when you choose to be transparent about something versus holding it inside and suppressing it? Just tell me in general, how does it feel to be a transparent Black girl?
It feels good. It feels scary at times because you don't know what the other person, is going to say. I think with time, and me just practicing my own emotional intelligence and like learning that, deepening that, as well as empathy, I've learned how to be transparent, but also lead with gentleness. Right, when I'm having a tough conversation, or if I'm expressing something, I try to go into conversations, just with a level of gentleness and an understanding that I might be meeting someone with emotions, with discussions in a way that they might not be prepared for, or a way that they might not have ever had a conversation before. And so how can I have this conversation with you, sharing how I feel, whether it's a conversation that, might have some tension, or just me just wanting to be honest about something, or just even me being vulnerable.
Mhm.
How can I do so in a way that allows for you to, see my heart in the matter, and lead with just a level of gentleness, because of my transparency. At times we don't always feel, I don't know if I always felt really gentle, when expressing things. I think when you've gone through trauma, at times it can harden you. And so as I've softened, especially even when we talk about like soft life and all of that, right? For me, a part of my soft life is just learning to like disarm myself, when I have to be vulnerable, because vulnerability does not always feel really good, right? It can often be a scary thing, but it feels good. It feels, freeing for me. And especially when I keep in mind, like, what is my goal in this conversation, right? When you're leading with transparency, asking yourself, what do you hope to gain from this discussion? And I think when you think about that, as well as as well as how you're going to come across, I think it can allow for you to be a bit more brave, as you're being transparent, when you know what your end goal is in the discussion, and when you know the journey that you've been on for yourself.
Thank you for answering that, because if we go to Transparent Black Girl, which I encourage everybody to do today, right now, soon, you're going to see a lot of beautiful images. You're going to see community. You're going to see laughing. You're going to see sisters loving each other. And I believe that that is the upside of it for sure. You know what I mean? Having community, feeling free, laughing. But I appreciate your candor and you saying, you know what? It may not always feel good when you're actually doing it. But on the other side of that, there is something waiting for you on the other side. So thank you for that. Cool. Well, I want to talk about the community. When you started, did you know you were going to be a community builder?
No, no, not at all. I remember it was something that I felt like people were building, things online, and that it looked cool, but like I didn't know what it would be like to this magnitude. Like, and then at that point of Instagram and social media, that was like, like 7 years ago, 8 years ago at this point, I was seeing people, and it was just like pictures. It was pictures. It was maybe an event once a year or like once a quarter. Like branding and storytelling and like, filming content, like all of those things were not something people were like promoting heavily. Like you weren't getting paid to post online like
Right.
8 years ago. Like that was not a thing. Like, and if
Now,
people were, it was like it was more like YouTube. Like there was no ads on Instagram. Like those things didn't, at least not in my world, like those things did not exist. So no, I did not. I was having fun. And I think because I was having fun, there was no pressure. There was no, this has to happen this day, this has to happen that day. Like even
uh,
talking now, with friends, or with mentees who are like, I need to start this platform, I need to have 100,000 followers by tomorrow, and I'm like, you need to slow down. Like
yeah.
that's not how you build community, right? That's not how you build an authentic one anyway, that'll follow you for years and years. We
Yes.
have people that come to our events that have been coming since day one, and that's because we stay tapped in with them, we stay engaged with them. But no, I did not have a clue in the world, and I think that that's what makes it even the more special, because it was something that God did. It was not a plan, by any means. And so I think that part has been one of the most beautiful pieces of that, and just being surprised in the journey.
Wonderful. All right. I'm just so honored. And I love that you shared that, because I think that, again, you go back to what's your motive. You know what I mean? Like when you have an agenda and it's an agenda that's not for authenticity, I think, people feel that. But when people are like, no, I'm rocking with her, she's really into this, then they'll come along. TBG provides a beautiful space for vital conversations that really might otherwise not happen. What is one unspoken truth about mental wellness or self care within the Black community that you feel is crucial for women to acknowledge and discuss openly for their collective liberation and healing? Do you feel there's something that, there's a truth that we're hiding that could all help us out?
I think that just across just our culture, that I think we're starting to talk about therapy, but I feel like it's still, I don't want to say surface level, but I feel like we're like, maybe we need therapy. We need to take our mental health more serious. But I feel like that's kind of like where we've stopped. I don't think we've really gone into detail as it relates to like knowing that therapy, going to therapy, it is not something that for me, I believe is is like a it's still looked at as a stigma. And I feel like conversations about therapy, I want us to normalize them and normalize the fact that like it's okay to be in therapy like even when your life is great, right? Like ultimately I think sometimes we look at therapy as something that is looked at if you're having a hard time or if you're struggling greatly. But you can be in therapy even when everything looks well to other people. I think ultimately when I think culturally we can seem like when you're struggling that's when we turn to things, right? That's when we turn to therapy or turn to the church or turn to different things that whatever we have in our current experience. But just the normalization of like everything could be going well and you still need to go, right? And if that just like how you go to the doctor, for myself, and that you can be thriving and still need that support, because I think it's important to keep that routine, that maintenance, and it's not the same for everyone, in terms of like how much or how little that you need. But I think we should continue to keep that muscle going and it not just be something that you do once or twice, that you keep that support, because therapy teaches you not just how to solve things, but it also teaches you emotional intelligence, teaches you empathy, and I think those things are very important, and things that for myself going to therapy has truly had me get some real muscle memory, with that I keep with me even when I'm not actively in therapy.
Yes, and yes, and yes, and more yes. I want to echo that. I was in therapy. My mother passed when I was 28, and I was in New York, and they required, HR woman was like, you have to go. You're in your 20s. Your mother just died. I didn't know anything about therapy. She was like, no, you have to go. And I was just like, oh no. She was like, you're going. Just tell me which one and I'll make the appointment. And I will forever remember Claire. I've forgotten her last name, but she was HR director at In Demand Television in New York. That absolutely saved my life. I didn't know that I needed it, but I did. I was 20, I didn't know enough to know anything, right? But what I also want to bring up is when it was time for me to be released. And I was in therapy consistently for a really long time. But my therapist at a certain point was like, okay, I think you're good. And he's like, but you can come back whenever you want. And I was like, I can. And he said, what you did, the analogy, he says, Olivia, just like you go in for your 6 month checkup or your annual checkup with your doctor, feel free. I've given you the tools. You've got the emotional intelligence. You've been in therapy for like 10 years now, Olivia. I think you can do it, right? Going out there, and if you need me, I'll be here. And so I did. And then I started doing annual check ins or 6 month check ins. And it was like, I was like, okay. But I had all of these things, even to this day, when I suffer many traumas, life is filled with traumas and experiences we never could ever plan for, prepare for emotionally, mentally, physically, financially. But when they come, there is definitely, I know I'm much more prepared from my therapeutic experience and journey. So thank you for sharing
You're
that.
welcome.
So you are doing big things. I saw your deal with ASICS. You're at your anniversary. What number are we on again?
Yes, we're on 7.
Unbelievable. And you're just beginning. So congratulations for what you've built. 7 years of anything. Some people don't make 7 years of marriage. So congratulations on
Thank
that,
you.
right? So you're focusing on what I read was you're focusing on the mental health of teen girls. Can you tell us more as we close out about why you chose the teen girls and how you're leaning into supporting them and what else you may have cooking for teen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it was always important to me to make sure that at some point Transparent Black Girl could be multi-generational, and be something that not just, the women within our core demographic resonate with, but, younger girls as well as, women that are older than us as well, regardless of age, that they feel like they can, you know, um, that they feel like they can find community within us. And I'm also a journalist. While I was growing Transparent Black Girl, I got my master's in journalism, and so I like to look at data as also a guide to programming as we build community. And I discovered that young girls were at some of the most new suicide and self harm rates, and so that was alarming to me. And wanting to know that we I think a lot of times as women on the internet, we talk a lot about inner child healing and how we're,
Mhm.
doing the work for the inner child of us. And I think that's wonderful. But while that's going on, there are children in real time that are struggling. And so I, thought about, what would it look like for us to, heal forward as women while also reaching back to them. And so that was something that was, important to me. And so we've been able to, do some really beautiful things and collaborate. We hosted not too long ago a meditation and talk with Nike and Dove as well, talking about, self-esteem and what makes you feel confident, and essentially had conversations about, what mental health and wellness support can look like. We've also led a mental health talk during Mental Health Awareness Month with Tina Knowles' organization, Tina's Angels. And so we talked about mental health with them as well. And so it's been really important to me for us to reach out to young girls. And we've gone to nonprofits as well within, where we are, because we're based in New York. And so we've done that also, and gone after school programs. And so it's just been really important to me to reach them, also because they are, all of the things. When I think about my life and the things that when I was the most insecure, when I had the most worries, when I had the most, just vulnerability about certain aspects of my life, it was when I was younger.
Yeah.
And if we can get them, at that age,
Yes.
I think we can, really do some really beautiful work. And so that's been a passion, and I'm really proud of that, as, just as a team, how we've been able to, just try to meet them, where they are. And so I look forward to doing more of that with young girls.
Congratulations. I
Thank you.
love that. And I love how just a very natural movement is leading its way in a very purposeful manner. Congratulations. May God continue to bless you with people supporting you, with communities supporting you, with brands that are coming in, hot to support you. I think that our young girls, I remember back to your point, and I really love what you said about we're talking a lot about our inner child needing to be healed. And while that's true, and we still have to go back and connect with those little girls, there is the opportunity for us to heal by helping another young girl heal.
Absolutely.
So all the talk, okay, that's fine, I get it, but let's go actually help a real little girl that's on the verge of suicide.
Absolutely.
So may God bless you. Good for
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
All right, sister, last question. How can we support you? How can we at Freedom at the Mat and everybody listening and watching, how can we support you?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first, they can follow Transparent Black Girl across all social media platforms. So that way they're able to, see us, know what we're doing. If we're hosting an event and they're local, we'd love to see your faces. And if you are already a member of Transparent Black Girl, or if our community is interesting to you, shoot us a DM. Talk to us about what kind of events you want to see happening, what you're interested in, or, what questions that you have, because I try to make sure that our events are as collaborative as possible, that we ask our audience questions, what they're interested in, what they're passionate about. So it's not just about the programming that we think they should have, but that we just like what we talk about as far as data is concerned, that we ask questions, that we check in with them, and that we make sure that they feel seen within our content. So that way they, can get just as much out of the experience as we do.
Thank you so much. Everybody, do everything she said. Follow her on all the different platforms. I hope that you've been encouraged in some way, emboldened to find your transparent Black girl. And if you're not Black, transparent girl, just to find the strength to tell your story, find your vulnerability. There's beauty and there's power in being transparent. May God bless each of you. Ashe.